Sterling Allen here, PESN. We're talking to Mike McKubre of SII International. We just had a tour of the facilities here where they're working on the Brillouin technology, and we're just going to ask him a few questions about that and maybe some other things that come up. He's got to get to some other work that he's got going, so we appreciate him taking some time. This is the PESN audience and wider. Scientific largely, but also we try and keep it somewhat lay so that newcomers can appreciate it. And if we just kind of give a bit of an overview of your experience with Brillouin, how you got involved, why you got involved, and what you did before that. We got some of that earlier, and I can include those notes in my write-up. But if we could just kind of give a bit of a synopsis of the whole Brillouin angle, so to speak.
Sure. Yes, Robert Goddess came to me maybe 2 years ago, described the experiments that he was doing, and a lot of what he was talking about resonated with the experience that I've developed over the years, and he was talking about very, very sharp current pulses, and I know that that is one of the ways to stimulate the effect. He ran some experiments in an open system in a electrochemical glass beaker actually, and had seen some effects and was looking to scale up to a slightly higher level, pressurized water systems, something I have experience with, from the old days working on conventional nuclear power systems. So he wanted advice, how to put the experiment together in a safe way and how to do the calorimetry in a manner that the results would be believable. So I went up to Berkeley, I looked at what he was doing, was happy with the level of professionalism, and a lot of enthusiasm, very good engineering. And so I sat down with them and advised them as to how I would put a system together that would be safe and believable. Went away for a while and came back, and the next time I went up there, they'd pretty much implemented what I'd suggested. They'd done a very nice engineering job. It's nice to be involved in the ground floor because you can understand the results. Since I knew what he had done and he had pretty much followed the direction that we advised, I was able to understand his results. I was impressed with one thing in particular, that he was able to turn on the power, or at least turn up the level of excess power, by changing the shape of what he calls a Q pulse. It's a very much smaller fraction of the input power. This was an electrochemical system, primary energy going into the electrochemistry, but by changing the shaping of this electrical impulse along the wire, he was able to change the level of excess heat. Nobody in this field up to that point certainly had achieved any level of control at all.
To be able to turn it on and off.
To be able to turn it on and off, or up and down. Both things have to be possible in a commercial technology. So he was able to do that. He had an idea for a new kind of experiment which very much resonated with some of the things that I'd been thinking about. So we invited them to bring their experiment down here to replicate what was being done in Berkeley, and maybe to use the SRI know-how in a particular kind of technology. Not sure I can tell you what that is because we still haven't implemented it yet, but there's an experiment waiting to be done. We will get round to it, and when done, I have very high hopes for the outcome. In the meantime, they're working on two different concepts: a wet system, a pressurized water reactor, which is what I had some input into the early designs of, and the system we have running here now is a dry, an all-gas system. So a sintered metal structure with hydrogen gas, hydrogen and/or deuterium gas. And we're running it. We've seen some interesting effects, but we have not seen the level of control yet in the gas system that they had previously achieved in their electrochemical systems. It's probably nobody's fault. It's been a trial of maintaining hydrogen overpressure. Hydrogen's very leaky. The temperature is very high. It's very difficult to make seals, and we're sort of learning on the go with this gas system. But I have high hopes for that too.
All right. And maybe you can talk just briefly about, you've tested some 15 other LENR related technologies, nominally successfully. Maybe just speak to that for a minute, because I wasn't recording that earlier.
Yes, well, something like between 12 and 15 formal replications, most of them sponsored by the U.S. government. Actually, DARPA sponsored the predominance of those. But we brought an experiment where interesting claims had been made. We brought the experimenter here, had him set up. It's all been him. We should have some women enter the field, and so far all males. Bring them in, let them set their experiment up, provide them with support, plumbing and electrical support and access to computers and whatever, but have them do their experiment their way. We watch and learn while that's going on. There's a phase of technology transfer where we learn what it is that they need to do in order to achieve their effects. Then we invite the inventors to leave, and we continue to fiddle with the experiment and perhaps changing out systems that we're not so happy with or have some questions about. So a full replication involves us obtaining the same results that they obtained with fully our control, without the inventors being present. And we've done that successfully 5 times, I think I had up on that slide, including the Fleischmann-Pons heat effect, the Miles helium production, Les Cases work, Arata and Zhang, and there's another one in there that was successfully replicated. In some cases we were able to find a flaw, a systematic error that had not been considered.
When you say some cases, you're not talking about the 5, you're talking about others that you considered.
Those cases were fully replicated. We went through the entire process and were able to obtain the results that were claimed by the original inventors. In another set, a smaller set, probably 2 or 3 cases, particularly the nickel light water work that Blacklight Power, in fact, was working on in those days, and Chino Srinivasan had an experiment which he'd successfully run at Baba Atomic Research Center, BARC, in India. We invited Chino to come here for a 6-month sabbatical. He came, he brought his experiment, he was able to set it up and obtain results consistent with what he was seeing in India. We then took over the experiment and were able, by additional diagnostics, to demonstrate that the effect was not a recombination effect, but a subsurface shuttle reaction, an interesting electrochemical effect that had not been considered. We were able to demonstrate that the heat that he was observing was not real, it was an artifact. So he went away unhappy, but ultimately happy to know what the truth was. So in some cases we've been able to demonstrate with additional diagnostics that the effect being claimed was right but mundane, didn't need a nuclear explanation.
You're talking about something needing to have, it's scientifically interesting if it's over unity, but a heat pump is 3 times over unity. So to be practical and really, something that can be commercially viable, it needs to be at least 6 times over unity, and you're hoping for at least 10, and you're expecting that maybe Brillouin might be able to achieve that?
Yes, those numbers change with the temperature, of course, and these are all Carnot constrained heat engines, but 3x, a good heat pump on a good day will give you nearly 3x. So there's not much point in selling an effect which takes expensive electricity and turns it into low-grade heat. In some countries, 5 or 6x would be enough of a gain to be marginally productive, but figure of merit that we're usually looking to is, can this give me 10x? Can you get 10 times as much heat out as the electrical power that you put into it? If you get 10x out at a reasonable temperature, 500 centigrade for example, you can turn some of that heat back into electricity and make the system self-sustain and have something left over. Very few people have claimed that. The energetics folks have seen 25 times more energy come out of their experiments than the electrical power going into it on 2 or 3 occasions. Very hard to reproduce, but believable and important. It's an important figure of merit because to know that 25 times is achievable is like knowing that your chess problem has a solution. You're willing to work harder in order to achieve it because it has been achieved before. Brillouin has that potential, but nothing I have seen in the data sets that I've looked at has been more than 4x, 400%. I think is about as much as they've got. No reason why they can't go higher. The energy expensive part of their system is the electrolysis in the wet system. The dry system doesn't even have electrolysis, just the Q-pulse, so you're simply pulsing current through the metal phase. If you make that sharp enough, you don't need to spend a lot of energy on it.
You're talking about the nuclear definition of what's nuclear, and does LENR fit into that definition? Do you want to address that for a minute?
Well, you're sitting here at in the Energy Research Center, and energy is our business, and more energy, better. The power of a nuclear reaction is, it has about 10 million times the energy density of the best possible, most conceivable chemical reaction. I'll qualify that in a second, but chemical reactions occur on the scale of 1/10 of an electron volt to 2 or 3 electron volts. Nuclear reactions can occur up to 100 million electron volts. Fission, fusion, D plus D to helium-4, 22.4 million electron volts. So 22.4 million compared to 2, it's a 10 million times gain. If you want energy, if you want primary energy, if you want to produce energy de novo, new, you want a nuclear process. So to me, nuclear is a good word. Now, I'm very well aware of the political, sociological sensitivity to the term nuclear. I was involved for many, many years in the conventional nuclear power industry, working to develop right here sensors for conventional nuclear coolant systems to ensure continuous safe operation. So I know the nuclear world very well, and the PR that has been associated with it, the bad handling and the issue of Fukushima, for example, is going to put a pall over the nuclear industry for years. As long as that set of reactors at Fukushima continues to spill radioactive material into the Pacific, people will be aware of the downside of nuclear. People are scared of nuclear weapons, and they took the word nuclear out of nuclear magnetic resonance and made it magnetic resonance imaging. It's the same thing. It's a nuclear effect in that case.
And safe.
And relatively safe and widely used and popular and very important. So Nuclear should be a good word. Unfortunately, it isn't a good word, but it is very hard to define any phrase intended to capture the sense of cold fusion without honestly incorporating nuclear into the name. It is a nuclear effect.
And this would be a very safe nuclear.
It has demonstrated itself so far to be safe, unconditionally safe. We won't be able to answer that until we have a very good physics-based model for the process itself. We need theory, in this case, to protect us from inadvertent mishaps on scale-up. So it would be very, very imprudent to scale this effect without having a pretty good handle on what exactly it is that you are scaling. But everything that I know suggests that this is a nuclear process, and we've identified nuclear products.
And talking of scaling, Brillouin's one of their first applications will be for stranded asset power plants, and that's a very large scaling situation. Do you see any need for, are you concerned about that scaling process?
No, I'm the opposite of concerned. If Brillouin is able to pull that off, substitute cold fusion heat sources for hot fission heat sources, it is a dramatic improvement in safety, both instantaneous safety, operational safety, and the long-term hazards of nuclear waste storage. As far as we know, there is no long-term issue from LENR type processes. Occasional tritium, which we know how to handle, relatively safe. No nuclear material is safe, but we know how to handle it. It decays with a time constant of 12.5 years, so it'll go away. The products of conventional fission reactors will sit and decay for hundreds of thousands of years.
You use the word fusion, cold fusion. Do you want to correct yourself there? Is that a proper terminology for LENR? Is it actually fusion, or is there something else? Transmutations, electron capture?
It's fusion. I don't understand people backing away from that concept. We don't know what the mechanism is, but light nuclei are being collected together to make heavier nuclei, whether this is by neutron transfer or electron transfer. It is a nuclear fusion process. Anytime you accrete from little to large, and with a mass deficit that shows up as energy, is fusion. Now, we came unstuck with the hot fusion community because fusion is a sacred word in the nuclear world. Fusion is their term. When they talk about fusion, they're talking about deuterium, sometimes lithium, sometimes tritium, but they have a very restricted set of reactions which they're considering to be fusion. In their view, D plus D would always go to helium-3 and a proton, or helium-3 and a neutron, or tritium and a proton. That is what is in their minds when you talk about fusion. But that is one example of one class of fusion process. You can't define the entire field by a single example. What we are doing, when we finally understand what it is, it will turn out to be some hitherto unknown and presently unexplained form of fusion.
Even if it's transmutation, you say that because it's gaining.
If you go from little to large,
it's fusion.
It's fusion. It could be transmutation too. But if you break it apart, it's fission. There are only two classes of nuclear reaction.
One other thing I want you to address, you talked about there shouldn't be competition in this field. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
The field is big enough, and presently there are four, maybe more, but approximately 4 players. And it's Brillouin here we're working with. Jeff Callion in Vancouver and Milan and Greece. There's Rossi in the US and Italy. And there's Mills, Blacklight Power. And those are the four groups that are sort of perched on the edge of commercialization. There should be no competition between these four groups. They should be working with each other to make each other succeed. When one succeeds, all will succeed. There isn't any possibility that a single corporation, a single company, a single country will be allowed to monopolize this technology. It's much too important for any one group to monopolize it. Won't be possible.
One validation validates all?
Yes. Well, one validation opens the door to funding, which allows for all to develop. Now, you know, in the 20 years from now, there will be Fords and there will be Volkswagens. So then they will have different market share, but if one succeeds, all will succeed.
Well, I appreciate your time. This has been really fun coming here to SRI, informative. I've been impressed with your facilities and appreciate you opening that up to us. I'm surprised, hasn't anyone ever been here before?
Oh, we've had a lot of people through. A lot of
people. Not published on the net?
No, not so much. Not so much. We've had a lot of the big actors, and BBC has been here, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And,
talking about the Brillouin stuff?
No, not in, you know, in the early days there was a lot more attention from the media.
Okay. Well, I'll let you get back to your day, and thank you again.
Thanks, Sterling. Well, welcome. He runs some experiments in an open system in a electrochemical glass beaker, actually, and had seen some effects and was looking to scale up to a slightly higher level, pressurized water systems, something I have experience with, you know, from the old days working on conventional nuclear power systems. So he wanted advice, you know, how to put the experiment together in a safe way and how to do the
angle, so to speak.
Sure. Yes, Robert Goddess came to me maybe 2 years ago, described the experiments that he was doing, and a lot of what he was talking about resonated with the experience that I've developed over the years, and he was talking about very, very sharp current pulses, and I know that that is one of the ways to stimulate the effect.
Sterling Allen here, PESN. We're talking to Mike McKubre of SII International. We just had a tour of the facilities here where they're working on the Brillouin technology, and we're just going to ask him a few questions about that and maybe some other things that come up. He's got to get to some other work that he's got going, so we appreciate him taking some time. This is the PESN audience and wider. Scientific largely, but also we try and keep it somewhat lay so that, you know, newcomers can appreciate it. And if we just kind of give a bit of an overview of your experience with Brillouin, how you got involved, why you got involved, and what you did before that. We got some of that earlier, and I can, you know, include those notes in my write-up. But if we could just kind of give a bit of a synopsis of the whole Brillouin.
Calorimetry in a manner that the results would be believable. So I went up to Berkeley, I looked at what he was doing, I was happy with the level of professionalism, and a lot of enthusiasm, very good engineering. And so I sat down with them and advised them as to how, you know, I would put a system together that would be safe and believable.